The meeting is now live.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Eden District Council's full council meeting. I'm Councillor Andy Connell and I'm the chairman of the council. I welcome everyone to this virtual occasion which is being streamed live on Eden's website. Before we go any further, I would like to mention that 3 weeks tomorrow ago marked the death of His Royal Highness Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Under normal circumstances, there would have been a civic ceremony in his honour, but because of social distancing regulations, that's not been possible. And therefore, I'd like to begin this meeting with a minute's silence as a tribute to Prince Philip's life of service to his adopted country, and indeed a tribute to his surviving wife, Her Majesty the Queen. So can we observe a brief silence? Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm now going to hand over to the Council's Monitoring Officer, Lisa Tremble, who will take us through some necessary announcements. Mrs. Tremble.
Thank you very much, Chair. As you've alluded to, this meeting is being hosted remotely as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, and regulations that were brought in via the Coronavirus Act of 2020 allow us to do this. The various elements of the regulations are being complied with, in that it allows members of the public and officers to participate in our meetings, whilst our current rules of procedure as set out in our constitution continue to apply. As you said, this meeting is being live streamed and it is being recorded and will be available for 21 days after this meeting has finished. Just in relation to housekeeping, if I could please remind members to keep yourselves on mute and your cameras off, unless you're invited to speak by the chair, in which case please turn your microphone and your camera on when you speak. There is a chat function available in this meeting to indicate any technical issues, or if you wish to second or speak on the matter at hand. If there is a technical issue, the chair will adjourn the meeting. There is a 4-hour limit on this meeting, so if we haven't concluded our business in that time, we will adjourn and reconvene at a later date. And voting tonight will be via unofficial recorded vote. So if your name is called, please respond verbally if you're for, against, or whether you wish to abstain from the motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lisa. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have received apologies for absence from Councillors Lawson and Thompson. Are there any others? Okay.
Sorry, Chair, we've had apologies from Councillor Armstrong as well.
Right, so Councillor Armstrong also. Secondly, by way of an introduction to members of the public.
Sorry, Andy, to butt in. Yeah. Councillor Lancaster, is she here or not?
I see that we haven't had a response from her yet.
Well, there is a possibility that she might not be at this meeting because her son was knocked down in Kirby Stephen yesterday, and I think she's had to go over to the hospital in Newcastle. I don't know which one.
I'm very sorry for that, of course.
For a second.
Thank you for telling me. I'm very sorry to hear that, and I'm sure Sandy and her family will be in our thoughts. That's very sad news. Okay, so we'll now, by way of introduction to members of the public and also a roll call and the declaration of interest, go through the roll, and the monitoring officer will call your name and respond present or here. And if you have an interest to declare, do so. There's no need to say no declaration of interest. Silence will be taken to mean that there is none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Baker.
Present.
Councillor Banks.
Present.
Councillor Chambers.
Councillor Chambers isn't present in the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Clark. Councillor Connell.
Present.
Councillor Derbyshire.
Present.
Councillor Dew.
Present.
Councillor Isles.
Present. I'd just like to inform the chairman that I'll be recording the meeting for my own personal use.
Thank you.
Councillor Fearon.
Present.
Councillor Greenwood.
Present.
Councillor Hanley.
Present.
Councillor Harker.
Present.
Councillor Holden.
Present.
Councillor Lynch.
Present.
Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor Meadowcroft.
Present.
Councillor Nicholson.
Present. And I would declare that I'm a member of Lazenby Parish Council, which has adopted services which are the subject of the notice. I think this is mainly for information, because I've got no financial interest and my views should not be prejudiced. So I will take the advice of the monitoring officer on whether I participate and vote on the item.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I don't see any issue why you can't continue.
Could I just ask you, Chair, before we proceed? I think there are probably a number of members who are members of parish councils. Do you consider it necessary for them to declare that?
Not from my perspective, Chairman. I think when we're looking at our assets and how we devolve them, then it's a matter for our members as district councillors. And as you say, most of them do have other interests.
Okay, but if when we get onto this item, if a councillor speaks and feels it appropriate because they are a member of a parish council to declare that, then they can do so at that point. Thank you very much. We'll continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Councillor Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Rain.
Present.
Councillor Robinson.
Present.
Councillor Ross.
Present.
Councillor Ruddle.
Present.
Councillor Ryland.
Present.
Councillor Story-Cookson.
Present.
Councillor Sharp.
Present.
Councillor Simpkins.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Todd.
Councillor Todd is not present in the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Tonkin.
Present.
Councillor Wicks.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor. Chair, that's roll call complete.
Thank you very much. We move on then to agenda item 3, which is the minutes. There are two sets of minutes, CI 860321 to CI 950321 and CI 960421 to CI 990421, these being the minutes of the council held on the 25th of March 2021 and the extraordinary meeting on the 7th of April 2021, which I am required to confirm and sign. I'm going to propose that these are approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much. And that was Councillor Ross. Thank you. Could you confirm verbally?
Yes, I'm happy to second the adoption of those minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody who wishes to make any comment on this before we proceed to voting? Thank you very much. I'm going to assume, unless the monitoring officer tells me otherwise, that in this instance we can dispense with a roll call unless somebody indicates in the chat function that they want one. In that case, I take the minutes who have been approved, NEMCON, and we move on to various announcements that I have to make, and this being agenda item 4. So, highlighting Eden. Highlights Rural Touring and Eden District Council invited communities across the district to engage in COVID-secure arts activities and events through their joint initiative called Highlighting Eden, and that project concluded last month. Apparently 170 attendees and more took part in the varied range of virtual arts events, including creative writing, choir singing and make a puppet workshops, and the project received very good feedback. One participant called it absolutely amazing. It really lifted their mood and was wonderful to work on something so creative. Another participant said that they were apprehensive about taking part, but it was a really good experience of lockdown and they felt that it achieved something worthwhile. Secondly, some information about the upcoming Eden elections. Elections in Eden will be going ahead in early May for the Police and Crime Commissioner and also for district ward by-elections in Hartside and Skelton Ward. And by-elections for Penrith and Alston Moor Parish Councils. These will take place in the normal way, but there will be additional safety measures at polling stations to ensure COVID safety for those who vote on the day. Penrith Walking Group has been launched for local veterans and families. It's called Forces Link. It looks to increase opportunities and support for the local ex-service community and their families, and it's announced its new weekly walking group called Forward Step. That's been set up to give people a regular opportunity to get outside and improve their health and well-being through walking. The group provides chances to form new friendships, connection and support networks in a relaxed, informal environment. Lockdown has been eased since the 12th of April, and in consequence of that, the leisure centres in Appleby and Penrith have now reopened, as have Penrith Tourist Information Centre and Appleby Local Links. Eden District Council has launched a cashless parking payment scheme. It's partnered with Pay by Phone to offer drivers cashless parking in all of the council-owned car parks. The service is now live and drivers can pay for their parking safely and securely using their mobile phones. Grant offers free energy saving measures worth up to £10,000 for Eden households. Eden District Council has announced the next phase in its Green Homes Grant, Local Authority Delivery Scheme, LAD. The LAD scheme can provide funding of up to £10,000 for a range of energy saving measures in Eden households, for example, solar panels, air source heat pumps and home insulation. This scheme is funded by central government and the council is working in partnership with E.ON to deliver it locally. Additionally, more measures and funding may be available for some residents through the council's EcoFlex scheme, details of which can be found on the Eden website. Through these schemes, the council is addressing 3 challenges: working towards zero carbon emissions, improving residents' health and well-being, and reducing fuel poverty in the homes of local residents. And finally, news that Patterdale Community Land Trust has received £132,000 from Eden District Council. This sum has been awarded towards the cost of acquiring of land for the construction of affordable housing in the parish. The Trust recently commissioned a housing needs survey which identified a need for affordable housing in the Patterdale area. Overall, the Trust's community-led housing project has received £181,095 from the council in support of its bid to provide affordable homes to the parish community. Community land trusts are groups that are set up and run by local volunteers, and funding is available from the Eden Community Housing Fund to support them to develop new affordable housing and provide other community services and facilities such as shops, pubs and workspaces. That concludes my announcements, and we move on to agenda item 5, questions by the public. We've received 2 questions tonight. The first is from Mr. Jonathan Davies. For clarity, Mr. Davies, am I correct in thinking that your question is in a personal capacity and not on behalf of Penrith Town Council, of which you are a member? Is Mr. Davies with us yet?
Chairman, I'm just about to dial.
Right. Okay, I will ask him again.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, Mr. Davies, you have a question for the leader. I know that you are aware of this, but I will reiterate that questions may be introduced by a preamble, but of course they're not an occasion for making a speech. Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question to the leader is, could the leader please explain why she is proposing to further delay and frustrate the devolution of assets to the communities and town and parish councils in Eden, with your motion that is before council this evening, seconded by Councillor Robinson, in a move that will risk assets being further removed from community ownership and control by the fast approaching restructuring of local government in Cumbria?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Davis. You did right using the title, the style councillor. I'm pleased to be able to reassure Councillor Davis that the motion will neither delay nor frustrate the devolution of assets to communities and town and parish councils in Eden, rather the reverse. The motion merely removes the deadline for completion of the process of devolution of assets. This means that existing negotiations can proceed and indeed new ones may commence.
Okay, thank you very much for the answer. Mr. Davies, have you a follow-up question?
I do, yeah. The leader states that it's removing a deadline. There is no deadline other than the end of a grant period within the policy and position that was debated and approved in 2017 by Eden Council. I'm just wondering if the leader can explain exactly what the intention is by the removal of that deadline and the financial implications it will have on Eden Council and council taxpayers.
Well, there was a March 2022 deadline for the completion of this devolution of assets, and that is very close. And if the transactions are not completed by then under the terms of the policy, this means that town and parish councils could not adopt them, and that there's the risk that we EDC would no longer maintain them. So there is the possibility that that this would have unfortunate consequences, which I'm sure were unintended consequences. But the time scale has been because of the last year in particular, very little has been able to take place, and there are a number of transactions that were incomplete. I'm sorry, I'm afraid the second part of your question, I was concerned about. You seem to be questioning the date. So if you would like to just repeat the second half of your question.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the policy documents that were before full council in 2017 include a date of April the 1st, 2022, where no grants will be paid beyond There's no other date mentioned in 2022 that would stop devolution from occurring.
Okay, I think it's just a question of that the March deadline is the end of March and your April date is the beginning, so I think they're the same date.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question is from Mr. Jeff Thompson. I think you're representing Fresh Air for Penrith. Are you there, Mr. Thompson?
Chairman, I'm just dialing him now.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
Yes, hello.
Hello. I understand you're representing Fresh Air for Penrith in delivering your question.
Thank you.
You understand that a preamble is which you have presented is acceptable, but of course,
Yes.
This isn't a speech. Had you wanted to deliver one, you could have addressed the council at the start of the meeting, but you've opted to give a question, so over to you.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Councillor Connell, yourself, and Lisa Trembles and her office for facilitating this question. Amiga Proteins operates a controversial animal rendering plant at a huge, already over-intensified industrial site at Wildriggs on the edge of rural Penrith. Amiga has 7, repeat 7, live planning applications before Eden District Council, dating back to March 2019 with some retrospective. Under EDC's planning procedures, Amiga's expansion continues unabated, but its planning applications lie unheard and unresolved. The applications have objections lodged against them, are locally sensitive, have a 1,256 signature petition against them, are from an applicant with a history of causing an offences odor nuisance to Penrith Pong. There is a massive lack of transparency at EDC re Amiga planning applications, a lack of public confidence in EDC's planning procedures, a lack of urgency and continued refusal of the council to listen and represent residents, a failure of EDC to communicate, questions to local ward councillors, the council leader, councillor members of the Amiga Community Liaison Group, and freedom of information requests are all unanswered. My question today is, when will Eden District Council wake up to the views and interests of local people, residents, the electorate, be transparent and call in the 7 planning applications from Amiga Proteins to the Planning Committee for discussion, debate and democratic vote. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I invite the leader to respond.
So thank you, Mr. Thompson. So I hope that you will recognise my good faith as I acknowledge yours, that your tireless lobbying of Eden District Council members and officers is motivated by your desire to protect the amenity of residents and visitors. EDC and its members are not free agents. We are constrained by the legal and regulatory powers the authority holds. In your question, you're asking EDC to ask outside the powers we hold. If there are no material planning grounds to object to an application, debate and democracy are irrelevant. The Planning Committee has no power to call in decisions that they have previously made. Planning law and policy in this case cannot accommodate Mr. Thompson's demands, your demands, even though those demands may seem reasonable to the residents whose amenity is adversely affected by the proximity of this plant to their homes, as well as to the members who represent them. I acknowledge your frustration that the planning system cannot deliver a remedy for the very real issues experienced by residents. This is not a failure of Eden District Council's planners, but of planning law and national policy. Omega proteins is in my ward, and I think you'll find that I have objected to applications where there was a possibility of success. Above all, to the extension of the plant outside the previous curtilage and to retrospective applications, the practice of which makes the community feel disrespected. I do respect the views you express, but neither I as ward member or leader of the council, nor Eden District Council, nor the planning system itself have blanket powers to prevent expansion of the plant. I'm truly sorry that the demands you make in your question today will not solve the very real problem that exists. They are outside planning law and so cannot be acceded to. To address the problem, there has to be a new conversation, and I would hope that Mr. Thompson, that you will be willing to engage in that.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, have you a supplementary question?
Right, thank you. A business makes planning applications, 7 planning applications, some dating back to March 2019. And the planning applications are never decided on. These planning applications are just lying there. They've been unheard, unresolved, no decision. Yet Amiga keeps building. So if you make a planning application, surely at some stage, somebody has to decide whether that planning application is going to be approved or rejected. Amiga's planning applications aren't decided on. They're just left in the wilderness while Amiga keeps building. These planning applications have objections lodged against them. They have material planning objections lodged against them. I can quote Councillor Patterson from months ago, a statement he made. They should have been called, they should have been decided on, they should have been called to committee. There's absolutely no reason a planning application from a company is not called to committee. Thank you.
That wasn't a question, Mr. Thompson.
Well, yes, but I'm not sure there is a question, or Eden Council seems to be refusing, failing to realise it is the planning authority. Planning applications come to Eden District Council for planning approval. These have not been approved.
Would you like to ask me about? Yes. Would you like to ask me about those 7 applications? So I'll take it that Mr. Thompson's just asked me about those 7 applications. Now, it has to be said, my briefing, and I did not go to look at them up individually, because as Mr. Thompson knows, finding these applications is not the easiest thing on the planet.
Well, that's
sorry,
intentional.
Mr. Thompson, we're not in the debate.
Yes.
You've asked a question about, and you.
No, let me just answer about these 7 planning applications. All right. Now, I am surprised that planning applications are sitting there unresolved. Planning applications don't have to be built out. Planning applications, there are regulations about timescales for dealing with applications. So I think, Mr. Thompson, let's just address those 7, and I'll get back to you with exactly what the situation is on the progress of those 7 through the system. However, that planning applications have objections against them, alas, does not mean that they will go to committee and that those objections are necessarily, unless those planning applications have material planning objections, they will not be able to be heard in committee, because there is no possibility of acceding to objections which are not material planning objections. And I know that that is very frustrating, but we as a planning authority cannot give accede to objections if they are not material, because that is not within the planning legal system and could be appealed against.
Thank you. That's the response. I'm sure, Mr. Thompson, you would want to pursue a dialogue on this, but this is not the time, I'm afraid, to take it any further. Thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you, Councillor Connell.
Okay, we now move on to agenda item 6, which is questions from members. We've received questions from 2 members. Councillor Wicks has asked 2 questions. My understanding is that both of these are to the leader. So I now hand over to you, Councillor Wicks, to put your question.
Thank you, Chair. While it's noted that there's 750,000 allocated in the budget for Project Town Hall, can the leader confirm the spend to date on the consultants who are undertaking the feasibility study and outline the project timescales and specifics going forward? In confirming the spend to date, can the leader point members to the allocated sums within the accounts and budget?
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. So to date, the consultants have been appointed and have commenced the work on the brief issued as part of the competitive tender exercise. No finance has been paid as yet, as the payment for the initial tranche of the work is not due until certain elements of the tender have been completed. The overall budget for the consultancy work was agreed as part of the medium-term financial plan as being £30,000 under the budget line feasibility study for town hall redevelopment brackets revenue close brackets, which was agreed by Council on the 27th of February 2020. It's expected the work will be completed by early summer, and the work involves liaising with a number of arts and culture organisations to test their appetite for the use of the town hall building, developing a range of options for the future use of the town hall, and developing a high-level cost plan to inform future decision-making on any renovations or future use of the building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have a follow-up to that, Councillor Wicks?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can the leader confirm the scope and remit of the feasibility study, i.e. is it purely limited to the arts facility? And does she not agree that this would have been an ideal project for member and wider public consultation?
Councillor Taylor?
Yes, I don't have the tender in front of me. I'm sure the tender is available if you would like me to find it and get it and sent to you. I think that there will be possibilities for members and the community to feed in. Indeed, I know that the town council is very interested in the future of the town hall. I think that I'm sure you've seen many local government association webinars on high street and town centre regeneration, and it's not at all controversial that a cultural use is an important one, as it as we know, town centres are places that people will go to do things rather than buy things, and that this is a superb building which can act as a civic centre, as a gathering place, and as places in which the community and visitors can take part in interesting activities which will bring footfall to the high street, which will develop the visitor economy and the nighttime economy.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Wicks, your second question, which should now be displayed, I think, which is about Vereda House. Can we have that displayed? Thank you. And the leader's response. So have you a follow-up question to that, Councillor Wicks?
Yes, I have. Is the design process, I mentioned it seems to be it's in its third design, and that hasn't actually been confirmed. Is the design process constantly evolving, and what advice has been taken in ensuring this old building is DDA compliant and fit for purpose?
I think there have been 3 designs which have been consulted on, haven't they? And the change has been in response to consultation and to the recommendations of our own planning committee. In terms of the technical question you just asked me about a particular building standard, I have a briefing here in front of me about the construction methods and how that relates to carbon emissions. I have renewed.
Out here, leader. DDA compliant is the Disability Act, and it's about accessibility for everybody, wheelchair users, etc.
Well, I mean, given that one of the main reasons for moving to Vereda House is because we are currently not compliant in either building, I would be startled if that was missed, because that was one of the main reasons or one of the principal reasons which lie behind the need to move.
Thank you. We now move on to Councillor Nicholson, who has 5 questions. The first of which, if we could have that displayed, is to Councillor McCall, and we have Councillor Nicholson's question and Councillor McCall's response. And the response. Okay.
Sorry, do you wish me, Mr. Chairman, sorry, do you wish me to read my question?
No, thank you. You want to display the rest of Councillor McCall's response? So, Councillor Nicholson, have your follow-up to that, please.
I have indeed, Mr. Chairman. I'd say thank you for your answer. The Budget Planning Committee met on the 9th of February 2021 to consider the proposed budget and make recommendations to the Executive and to Council on the content. Why, as in previous years, was no formal report of the Budget Planning Committee recommendations prepared and submitted to the Executive and to Council?
Point of order, Chair.
Sorry, we'll wait for the answer and then you can raise your point of order. Councillor McCall.
Well, I think I'm going to have to get back and provide a written response to Councillor Nicholson on this, because I'm not aware that I had that particular responsibility at this time. So I'll get back to you on that one. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Before you raise your point of order, which I think I can probably anticipate, I've made a mistake there. Of course, in live meetings, we have the questions all to hand, and members have them in their hands, and it's usually been considered unnecessary to have of what are often quite lengthy responses read out. However, I do recognise the circumstances are different at present, and therefore I apologise, Councillor Nicholson, for saying you didn't need to read your question out. You're quite right, it would have been better to do so. And we will, for the rest of your questions, have you read them out and have the responses read out, because some of those present will not have these in hard copy in front of them. OK, so your next question, which is to Councillor Banks, do read it out, please.
Point of order, Chair.
Chair.
Point of, yes.
Chair, you haven't actually asked Councillor Ryland what his point of order is.
Your point of order, Councillor Ryland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My point of order is that Councillor Nicholson should be reading out his questions. We have public attendance at this meeting, and the public will not be seeing the question and the responses.
Indeed, I agree with you, and that's what I just said.
Yes, well, that was my point of order. So I think actually that you have to go back to Councillor Nicholson's first question so that the public will understand it. Thank you.
Monitoring officer, I'll take your advice on this. Shall we do that? Yes, we'll do that so that Mr. Ryland's happy, Councillor Ryland's happy, and the public are happy. So sorry about that. Councillor Nicholson, read out your first question, please, to Councillor McCall, and then Councillor McCall, read out your response.
Right, the question is to the Chair of the Budget Planning Committee, and it reads, what is your vision for the Budget Planning Committee and its relationship with overview and scrutiny? To what extent is your vision being realised?
Okay, so I'll respond to that. The Budget Planning Committee was not my vision. It was established following recommendations made by the Budget Scrutiny Panel to Council in May 2020. Its intention was to formalise a committee to undertake not only the budget scrutiny process, but a wider remit for monitoring the budget throughout the year, and to consider any other specific finance matters, such as the recent Heart of Cumbria review. I think this dovetails with the Overview and Scrutiny Committee's more operational remit that scrutinises service-based functions and performance-related matters. The Budget Planning Committee has considered and debated the matters within its remit, such as the budget, budget monitoring, treasury management, and the Heart of Cumbria. It is therefore performing this function as originally intended by the Budget Scrutiny Panel. My ongoing vision would be that this committee continues to be a forum where these issues can be openly discussed by members and appropriate recommendations made such that the budget remains balanced, prudent and closely monitored. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the follow-up question you're going to answer in writing. Yeah, my mistake. At live meetings, we have adopted the practice of having the questions all printed out, available to all members and members of the public, so there wasn't a need to read them aloud. But you're right, in present circumstances, public don't see these questions in advance and members may not have printed them. So let's now get on to the second question from Councillor Nicholson, which is to Councillor Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question is, the annual report on scrutiny activity for 2021 was discussed at a meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee held on 1st of April 2021. The report stated that the member working groups established by Council were part of the scrutiny process and were likened to task and finish groups. How can this be, given that Council appointed members of the executive to the groups and the Council Constitution states that members of the executive should not be involved in scrutiny?
Councillor Banks, in your capacity as Chair of Overview and Scrutiny, would you respond to that, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, for your question. My answer is working groups were set up to be an extension away from the scrutiny as informal committees with their own terms of reference and provide an opportunity for all members to contribute in discussion on a subject within their expertise. Thank you, Chair.
You have a follow-up question, Councillor Nicholson?
I do, Mr. Chairman. And my question is that your answer is at variance with the statement made in the annual report on scrutiny considered by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of April 2021. I quote from the report at paragraph 2.2. These working groups have taken the place of task and finish groups, which would otherwise have formed part of the scrutiny review work of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. It is timely this year for us to review the effectiveness of this arrangement, particularly against their intended purpose of improving member engagement and influence on these important areas. In view of this, I repeat my question: is it right that members of the executive are members of the working groups? Thank you.
Councillor Banks.
I'll repeat mine. If they are away, if these committees are away from scrutiny with their own terms of reference, yes, I do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Your next question, Councillor Nicholson, is to the Leader of the Council. Will you now read it, please?
Thank you. I understand that Haworth Tompkins were awarded an assignment to examine the feasibility of using the Town Hall as an arts centre. Were any other potential uses considered, and is the brief solely related to use as an arts centre?
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, will you respond, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. So Haworth Tompkins have been appointed to carry out the Penrith Town Hall feasibility study and are currently engaged in the initial stages of the work. The brief has a focus on liaising and engaging with a range of potential arts and culture sector users to ascertain their likely interest and commitment of wishing to have a presence in a redeveloped and repurposed town hall, but also requires the consultancy firm to provide some alternative proposals for the commercial use of the town hall if there is insufficient local demand or interest from arts and culture groups within the local area.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Councillor Nicholson?
Yes, I do. I have to say that members learned of this initiative in the newspapers, that is a fact. But with hindsight, and given the long history of this iconic listed public building, I was wider member and public engagement via a structured scrutiny review not considered as a precursor to commissioning external consultants at substantial cost.
Councillor Taylor.
As I sort of said in my reply to Councillor Wicks, this is actually quite a wide-ranging tender, and although a cultural use is a very appropriate one, and so that's the headline, there is nevertheless, you know, other uses are included in the tender, such as, you know, incubators for small startup businesses, and community use, you know, a cafe, those sorts of things. Now, it is whether it's to be used for purely commercial use will almost certainly emerge from the process of this feasibility study. A lot of the feasibility study is, you'll notice that the Haworth Tompkins are in fact architects, so a lot of it is looking at the fabric of the building and what would be the possibilities of, as we've just discovered, accessibility and so on and so forth. So there's a number of parts of the tender which are not totally focused towards the end use. Why was scrutiny not involved? I'm not, as you know, I am the leader, and we the executive don't have a relationship of that sort with scrutiny. Of course, if scrutiny had wanted to, we would have been very happy to accede to that request and be interested in looking forward to what they said.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Nicholson, you have a question for Councillor Greenwood, the resources portfolio holder. Will you read it out, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's rather a lengthy question, so please bear with me. It reads, please tell me the number of consultants and fixed term appointments utilised by Council and the value of the contracts that were active in the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021 in the following areas. And they are lifted directly from the Council's corporate plan. To do with the corporate plan development and delivery, we have the sustainable objective, and the issues there are zero carbon, lobbying, recommissioning waste, recycling and street scene services, review of local plan, Council's transformation programme, in brackets 1 Eden. Secondly, healthy, safe and secure, develop housing strategy, support community-led housing, reduce fuel poverty linked to zero carbon strategy, develop Eden economic strategy. Thirdly, connected, transport improvements, business growth, leisure services, renewed working arrangements with town and parish councils, superfast broadband action plan, and finally, creative, carbon literacy training for business, arts and culture strategy, support for market towns, review of employment land. Thank you.
And Councillor Greenwood, if we would have Councillor Greenwood's response displayed, and Councillor Greenwood, you read it out, please.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Nicholson. The question is complex and will take time to complete, and a written answer will therefore be provided. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary question, Councillor Nicholson?
I do, and it is that I have to say that this a disappointing but hardly surprising answer, given the osmotic relationship between the budget and the council plan. My question was submitted 1 week ago. When can I expect an answer, and will the answer be published in the minutes of this meeting?
Councillor Greenwood.
I would just like to say that the answer will come as soon as possible, and it is hoped that it will be in time to go in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Nicholson, your fifth question is to the Deputy Leader of the Council, Councillor Robinson. Would you read it out, please?
Thank you. The CIPFA, that is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accounting, statement on the appointment of the resources portfolio holder to the Council's Accounts and Governance Committee, which has the Audit Committee, reads, and in inverted commas, CIPFA's guidance, position statement and supporting guidance are available to view, and there is a fairly lengthy web link which I won't read out with your consent. And I go on to say that, and it goes on to say that having executive members on the committee is discouraged, as it could deter the committee from being able to challenge or hold to account the executive on governance, risk and control matters. This approach is consistent with audit committee practice in other parts of the public sector and in the private sector. Inviting an executive member onto the committee should be avoided unless the committee has other compensating arrangements to ensure independence. For example, a majority of independent members or an independent chair. And I would add that neither of these applies in this case.
And
sorry, continue. There is no slight on Councillor Greenwood's integrity or competence is made or impaired. Please explain the background to Councillor Greenwood's appointment and tell me why the defence of what I am informed was a political decision was given by an officer at the meeting of the Accounts and Governance Committee on 15th of April 2021.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will respond to Councillor Nicholson, and thank you very much, Councillor Nicholson. The question was, as I understand it, first asked of our officers prior to the Accounts and Governance Committee, and the same question repeated at the committee. An answer, as I understand it, was provided to you prior to that committee, and that the advice from SIPFA was guidance, and therefore the appointment was lawful. This is why an officer answered the question at the committee, as it was not deemed to be a political matter.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, have you a supplementary question?
Yes, I have, thank you. My information is that it would be extremely unusual for an officer to advise an elected member to ignore guidance from an authoritative source. I am on record as saying that the action taken is lawful. This was the advice given by the officer. I am further advised that the decision to ignore advice was a political decision, most likely taken by members, and it was extremely unlikely that an officer would advise a member to do this. Do you agree that it is in the public interest that a record of the decision to ignore SIPFA guidance is placed in the public domain via the minutes of this meeting?
Chairman, through you, I have nothing more to add than to the response that I've already given. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the questions. Councillor Cookson, you did indicate in chat a desire to ask a question, but I'm sorry, I think we have to follow our rules here that member questions are submitted a day in advance. They are printed out, and whoever the question is put to has the opportunity to produce a written response. So I'm sorry, we can't take a question at this meeting, and so we'll move on.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Henry. So that concludes members' questions, and we now move to motions on notice, and a motion on notice has monitoring officer. Yes, please.
Sorry, Chair. I'm aware that Councillor Chambers has joined the meeting, and right. I'd be grateful if he could acknowledge to us that he's present, but and also whether he has any declarations of interest to make, please.
Indeed, yes. Ian?
Yes, present and no declarations.
Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to agenda item 7. A motion on notice has been received from Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor, I think it would be appropriate if you read out your motion for the reasons already given in relation to questions, namely that members of the public may not have seen this, and then speak to it. Could I ask, please, members who aren't engaged in this to switch their cameras off? Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. So this motion on notice made under Rule 13 of the Constitution.
Could we have it displayed, please, and read out? I think for the benefit of the public who may not have seen it.
So I've moved this motion, and it will be seconded by Councillor Robinson in the normal way later. Devolution of assets.
Sorry, I'm sorry. For the reason I just mentioned, following the practice that was insisted on in relation to questions, could we have the motion displayed? Is that possible?
Thank you very much.
And if you read it, just so that everybody present at this meeting knows what we're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will you read that out, please, and then speak to it?
Thank you. So the devolution of assets to parish councils. In July 2017, Eden District Council adopted a policy whereby parishes were told that if they did not take responsibility for certain services, including public toilets and footway lighting, then Eden District Council would very likely withdraw those services from March 2022. This council should indeed encourage parish and town councils that wish to take on services for the benefit of the community to do so. However, The threat of withdrawing services, if parishes and towns are unable or unwilling to take them on, is no basis for a constructive relationship between the district and parishes and towns. The executive is required to work within the council's policy framework. That framework is partly defined by the decision in July 2017 to cut rural services under the guise of devolution. That is not acceptable to me, the members of the executive, or, I imagine, any councillor who cares about protecting rural services. So I'm going to just say one more thing before I come back to with the resolutions. So, like many of us, looking forward to local government reorganisation, I've been attending webinars run by such organisations as Localis and New Local, and successful community asset transfers take a long time, involve true co-production, and, in the striking phrase from a Localis webinar on community power, you move at the speed of trust. So, pre-publication of the devolution white paper hinted at devolving services to parishes, what they call in Cornwall double devolution. So, one devolution from central government to the unitary, and then from the unitary to the local, to the micro-local. So Chippenham, for example, is a super parish with 70 employees and a £4 million turnover. And while this will be welcome to some, in Eden we have some very small parishes and meetings where this considerable work might be more of a burden than a benefit. This dialogue between EDC and the parishes and town councils needs to be undertaken afresh, and as you see in the second part of the motion, we have proposed how to do that. So I therefore urge Eden District Council to resolve to 1. Immediately rescind the March 22 deadline for the withdrawal of rural services that parish and town councils have not adopted, as defined in the report considered by Council in July 2017. And 2. Instruct officers to work with overview and scrutiny and partners, including parish and town councils and/or their representatives, to develop a new policy that will support devolution of appropriate services to parish and town councils for the benefit of the communities we serve, rather than primarily to cut costs for Eden District Council. So I move this motion and I reserve the right to speak at the end of the debate.
That is your right, as the mover of the motion, to speak at the end, if you so desire. Councillor Robinson, will you, I know it's been stated that you're seconding it, but we need your confirmation. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I do. I will second the motion and I reserve the right to speak.
Thank you. Now, would any member wishing to speak to this please indicate in the chat function? Well, okay, we have a number now. Right, thank you. Right, I'm just trying to work out who comes first. On my screen, they're now being, we've got Councillor Isles, Councillor Clark and Councillor Hanley, and we take them in well, Councillor Hanley comes first. So Councillor, let's start with you, Councillor Hanley, as they appear now. Okay. And Councillor Rain, you'll all get your turn, but starting with Councillor Hanley. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member. I've got to declare that I'm a member of Alston Parish Council. And I discussed this with the clerk, and we were very happy about this this proposal, as Alston Moor Parish Council has been very worried about the cost of funding footway lights, And we wondered, I mean, this is I'm sure you won't be able to answer this, but we were wondering whether we can transfer the cost back to EDC, but that's another issue, I presume, as we have no maintenance, as with no way of maintaining them without an agreement with EDC. Also, we've been very delighted not to have to take on the public toilets, because that was a big worry in the next year or two. So I'm just we're very much in support of this motion at also, well, myself and the parish council. We haven't discussed it at the actual full meeting yet, but I presume everybody else will be in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think on my list next comes Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering, how will the time extensions affect the sliding scale of transfer grants? They started at 100, but by the 4th or 5th year, they were down to something like 25% or less. Will they still remain the same, or will they start afresh? Will they start at all?
Councillor Taylor, do you want to respond to that? You can reserve it to the end of the debate if you wish.
If you look in part 2 of the motion, there are many questions such as you've just brought up, Councillor Clark, and it's not going to be an easy thing for Overview and Scrutiny and their partners to sort this out, but the responsibility for that decision is with Overview and Scrutiny and their partners.
Thank you very much. We've got a mixture of comments and questions, and rather than try and differentiate, we'll take them as they've been placed in order, and the Councillor Taylor can either respond at that time or reserve the response to her remarks at the end of the debate, which is entitled to do. Councillor Isles comes next.
Thank you, Chairman. I have long expressed my objection to the closure of public toilets, and I'm very grateful to the leader for bringing forward this motion. It removes the arbitrary deadline for Eden Council to offload services to parishes, some of which may be unable to maintain them. With a new council, with new priorities, I'm hopeful that a way may be found to retain those services that have survived to now, and I will be happily supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rain. Councillor Rain.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. There is things in this motion that I do support, but it could have been written better that the grants didn't finish in March 2022. So therefore, I feel as if I can't support the motion. But I've got a couple of questions. I was on the first review of devolution of assets group. It was a cross-party task and finish group chaired by the Lib Dem councillor Neil Hughes. It was very long, very intense review. In fact, a review of devolution of assets to parish councils was proposed and agreed at the last scrutiny meeting on the 1st of April of this month. Question 1. Is it correct that 2 members of the executive are behind a proposal to instruct officers to work with scrutiny? The leader has just said in a recent response that she had no relation or control over scrutiny, but yet they are asking in this motion to instruct officers to work with scrutiny. Should council not refer the matter to overview and scrutiny, who would then work up a proposal for a task and finish group? That's question 1. I'll ask my second question. Question 2. As scrutiny are already on the case, we should hold the scrutiny review as planned. There is still 11 months before the March 2020 deadline to carry out the review. The vague wording in the motion, EDC very likely withdraw those services from March 2022. Now that's very likely. It doesn't say it's going to. Does not mean that all those services will be withdrawn. However, one assumes that that wording was in the report agreed by Council in July 2017. I haven't done my research on that report. This motion on notice is very decisive. If this motion is passed tonight, will the Council repay the parish councils back for their expenses and replace the lights which has already been removed? Thank you.
Do you want to answer that now or at the end of the debate?
Well, there's quite a lot, isn't there? So I think let's leave it till the end.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm a bit puzzled why, I mean, this is a really important issue, and the motion actually acknowledges that, because what we're talking about here is a significant change of policy. And what I'm puzzled about is why a motion on notice has been chosen to pursue this. The normal practice, I think, would have been to have an officer report with all of the background and some specific recommendations that related to the resolutions of council in July 2017. So why are we looking at a motion and notice and not a detailed report with all the information that we would need in order to come to an informed conclusion?
Thank you for your question. Again, I'll leave it to you, Councillor Taylor, whether you respond now or wait until the end of the debate.
I think we'll wait because we're stacking them up, aren't we?
Thank you. Could I ask Councillors one?
Yes, I have further questions, please, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Right.
Yes, Councillor Rain, would you switch your camera off, please?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't like you rolling your eyes when a member actually asks a question. You rolled your eyes when Councillor Nicholson actually asked.
Right, you've gone on mute.
I really don't know what this about my eyes is. I'm very sorry for the actions of my eyes. Councillor Nicholson, go ahead, please.
Right. My second question is to ask what is meant by the statement for the benefit of communities that we serve in point 2 of the proposed recommendation. Because my belief is that the future of this can only be one of 3 things. One is that the arrangements are withdrawn altogether. Is that what's wanted? Secondly, that parish councils and Eden district councils and town councils agree to share the costs. Or thirdly, town and parish councils actually meet all of the costs. There's no silver bullet for this. This is about, as it's alleged, this is about money, but I've got more to say about that in a moment. So what is this business about the velvet, the iron glove or the iron hand in the velvet glove mean, which is what I take from the expression that I've just quoted?
Do you want to answer that now or again reserve your right at the end of the meeting? My apologies, Councillor Nicholson, I've just noticed the plural that you have questions. Have you further questions? Because
I'll rest my case here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
But I do wish to speak later in the debate.
Well, I mean, normally there's one members that have got one speech to make. So if you've more to say, please do so now, please.
Right. Okay. then I will carry on, and I will say that, I'm not speaking to defend the decision of a former administration, and the current administration can do what it wants to do in terms of, of policy. I've already questioned the reason for proceeding with a motion on notice rather than a formal council report. And if we had had the latter, then I believe we'd been able to make a well-informed decision. We don't have any documented information or matter of record on the legal implications of the proposal. We don't have anything on the financial implications. And as I've just said, there's only 3 options available at the end of this, if a conclusion is wanted, instead of, as I suspect, simply deferring a decision and effectively kicking the can down the road. The motion overlooks the fact that the decision taken by Council in July 2017 followed a long period of consideration and consultation with parish and town councils. Those of you who've read the report considered at that meeting will be aware of, of many of the issues. You'll also be aware that the package of measures included financial support for running costs over a 4-year period, meeting the costs of replacing and upgrading lighting columns with eco-friendly LED heads, and some of the councils that have adopted services have been able to make improvements via grants, which were not available to Eden District Council, and they've made cost reductions by local sourcing of services. The special expenses charges, which the council used to levy, were discontinued in 2018, and all of this has helped to reduce the financial burden on the councils concerned. There is no recognition of any of this in the motion before us, and for the record, I will say that the last administration did not increase council tax over the 4 years of its stewardship. What is important here is that we have a level playing field for all town and parish councils in Eden, and that the position of those councils that have adopted services and incurred expenditure is taken into account. The councils that have not adopted services have had them provided at full cost to EDC. I want to propose an amendment to the resolutions, and that is that EDC offers to refund expenditure incurred by the adopting councils, so that all councils have the same opportunities to reconsider their position on an equal basis. That is my proposed amendment, Mr. Chairman, and I now invite somebody to second it, please.
Well, I'll invite someone to second it if I may. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Nicholson's proposal? It's seconded by Councillor Wicks. Would you confirm aloud that you are seconding the same?
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to second the amendment. At the end of the day, we need an equal playing field for all parish councils and town councils.
Right, we're now on to the amendment. Now, I don't know whether the amendment will need to be written up so that councillors are clear what precisely the amendment says.
May I repeat?
Yes, indeed.
The amendment says that EDC offers to refund expenditure incurred by adopting councils. That is, those who wish to take advantage of a refund.
Oh.
To put all councils on the same financial basis.
I think we will need to have that displayed if that's possible, officers, just so that everyone is. It was very clearly stated that it's better for the benefit of councillors and indeed the public to know exactly what the amendment is.
Chair, that's fine. We can do that. If you can just give us a moment, please.
OK, well, we'll carry on. We now move into a debate on the amendment. Other councillors wanted to speak on the motion, and depending on what happens, they may have the opportunity to do so, but will you please indicate again if you want to speak to the amendment, so that we're quite clear what you're doing. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but if you put down speak, will you do so again so that it's clear that we're now talking about the amendment? Okay, so I thank you. I have got to get rid of that. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Rain, Councillor Dew, Councillor Hanley have indicated a desire to speak on the amendment. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Chambers, Councillor Martin, yeah. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I mean, the amendment is indeed one potential path to travel down, but it may not be the only path to travel down. It is a sort of like a single solution, and is not really necessary, because in 2 you'll see that we are providing for full involvement of members and officers to try to work out what is the fairest at exactly a level playing field, which is you know, I don't know, we didn't specify any characteristics of the new policy, but the new policy is absolutely to make sure that that this policy proceeds, that devolution of assets to parishes is fair and is exactly what each parish and town wishes, and that nobody is disadvantaged by what's happened before or what happens in the future. And I think that the amendment is not guaranteed to provide that.
Thank you. Councillor Rain.
Thank you, Chairman. I forgot to declare I am a member of Crosby Ravensworth Parish Council, but we didn't decide on the devolution of assets. We're going to go for dark sky status. I forgot to. I am going to support this motion, but if it falls, I'd like to put another amendment forward, please. Thank you.
So you're supporting the amendment?
I am supporting this amendment, but if it falls, I have another amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Dew.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's disappointing that the motion that had been put before us this evening was so vague, wanting in clarity. I was going to find it very hard to vote for it. I would probably abstain from it. I think the motion itself, and I know we're talking about the amendment, but I'll come to that in a minute, was erroneous. It talks about the aim originally was to cut rural services, whereas the aim was to safeguard services, and there was no urban rural bias at all. And the major concern was one that Gordon Nicholson, Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Handley and Councillor Rain and others have touched on, was that it appears to be the original motion making the devolution of assets optional. So if a council elects not to take them on, the EDC would continue to provide them. And so where would that leave those councils? The one that I particularly have in mind is Kirkby Stephen Town Council, which I'm not a member of, which is in my division, that has taken on responsibility for freeway lights. It's trying to take responsibility for toilets and the visitor centre, but hasn't so far got very far, and also the children play areas. It has budgeted for those. It has increased its precept. The rollout has been shambolic. This original motion totally confused. Where exactly does this leave those parish and town councils that have stepped up to the mark? I mean, the Councillor Taylor doesn't seem to know quite where they're going on this. I presume they're going to abdicate responsibility to some kind of scrutiny group. It's simply not good enough, councillors, that we're discussing this in this way. As Councillor Nicholson has pointed out, it is simply not the right way to go about doing this. I will support the amendment. It at least clarifies one aspect of it, what will happen to those parish and town councils that have taken responsibility. They will be refunded. But to be honest with you, this needs for us to talk about it properly, a good deal more work. That's my view, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hamley.
Sorry, Andy, I'm just switching the things on. Right, my query was really to try and get Councillor Nicholson to clarify what he meant by the level playing field. I mean, Councillor Dew has clarified to a degree in that, some parish councils have taken on board and have progressed, but others haven't so much. And so I'm just, I mean, also I can remember a report about this, about how many, who has done what, and also the recommendation that COVID has delayed things and that we should be delaying the transfer for at least a year until 2023, March 23. So, yeah, I mean, it does need a fair amount more discussion, I think. But I think, as I said before, my feeling is that Alton Moor Parish Council would very much recommend this, because we were quite worried about the costs that would be incurred by the parish council.
Councillor Nicholson, you want to respond at this point?
Well, I think I was asked a question by Councillor.
Yes, indeed. I meant respond to the question.
Yeah, if I may. Well, I mean, a level playing field is basically a statement that, well, it means that all parish councils are in the same position. We have a situation where, as described in the motion, some are unable, some are unwilling, and by inference, some have taken over and adopted assets, and in so doing have incurred costs. We know that others have developed these facilities at some cost to themselves, also with grant and and so on. But I think the main point is that if a council wishes to change its mind, if this motion is passed and a council that has adopted facilities wishes or services wishes to change its mind, would it be able to do so? We don't know. And a gesture would be to offer a refund. Now that would mean that in terms of expenditure, all of the costs of the services that were considered for devolution would be met by Eden District Council, and that is, and the level playing field primarily relates to the expenditure and costs incurred or not, as the case may be, and the provision of the services to the various parish councils. That should be on an equal footing.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Councillor Hamley, it's not really appropriate to respond to that. Not under rules of debate. Councillor Nicholson, because he put the amendment, can respond to a question. Now, next I have Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether I'm responding to the amendment or
no, you're speaking to the amendment. If you want to speak to the motion, then that depends on whether we return to the motion. That depends on the fate of the amendment. This debate is on the amendment, which is on the screen at the moment.
Yeah, well, this will probably go because I'm speaking as chair, declaring interest as chair of Heskett Parish Council. So we did actually take on, signed an agreement with Eden District Council, and we adopted 47 of our 76 footwear lights in the parish. Over the 4-year period, the Parish Council has received a total of 14,213 from Eden as part of the transfer agreement. Heskett have paid to Eden a total of £9,854.83, excluding VAT. Over the 3-year period, 2018 to 2021, with the final year due in 2022, which is estimated to be 2,800. In order to ensure that the costs of general supply and maintenance, as well as future and subsequent costs, be adequately covered, in future, Heskett Parish Council have had to put up their precept by £1,000 each year, and looking at 22-23, it may just be £500. Heskett Parish Council will totally either lose or have lost 29 of those lights, and not through choice but a decision made by an EDC officer. Parishes may have decided not to take them on or delay the process. If you rescind this deadline, what happens to the lights? And this is where we're looking at refund, or what happens to the lights that haven't been taken down by 2022, and are we expected to receive a refund for the money that has been paid? So it does come into the new amendment. And also, how many towns and parish councils have actually adopted assets, and how many haven't unwillingly adopted them? Question for the leader. Thank you. That's the end of my.
Thank you. Right, it's now Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. I can't switch my camera on because it would appear that my camera isn't working. I've just got the computer back today, so apologies for no camera showing.
Well, we know what you look like, Ian. It's okay. Yeah.
There's a deadline set, and it should be a day to. It's another case that the goalposts are being moved. They say the date was set, so people and council should have moved and acted on that. So, but Councillor Nicholson's proposal to me makes good sense, so I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Isles. Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chairman. The questions and the debate over the last few minutes shows what a really bad idea this offloading essential services to parishes was. I said I've spoke against, especially the closing of public toilets in Penrith, because that is the town where I live. And I did raise a question of the previous portfolio holder about what would happen if the Penrith Town Council didn't take over the public toilets in Penrith, and his answer was they would be gone, which is what really has upset a lot of people in Penrith, the threat of losing such an essential service as public toilets from Penrith. Now, this amendment, it just muddies the water. I mean, my background is IT, and we are the motto of case, keep it simple. I won't mention the last S, but this is what we should be doing. This motion is going to give the overview and scrutiny panel the opportunity of exploring all the different issues that surround this, and to come up with solutions. Now, the motion removes the arbitrary deadline of kind of offloading the services, and so at least the danger of closing public toilets will be removed. So I will not be supporting the amendment. I will wholeheartedly support the original motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McCall.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. No, I won't be supporting this amendment. I mean, the whole situation is extremely complex, and it'll take quite a bit of sorting out with officers and members, but I don't think we should offer a blanket refund of expenditure incurred when simply we've no idea what this expenditure might be. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you very much. Next, Councillor Wicks.
Thank you, Chair. I've just been listening, obviously, to the other councillors speaking on this amendment, and words come to the fore like complex situation with no idea of the costs. And this is exactly why this shouldn't be a motion on notice. This should be a professional report presented by officers with the costs and legal implications of this policy change. I do agree with the amendment. The Localism Act 2011 was the idea that local people should be making local decisions. If this policy is going to be changed, we need to see how parishes which have taken assets on are going to receive recompense for expenditure to date. Also, we need to look at how EDC will ensure that the services assets, public toilets, Councillor Isles, will be safeguarded for communities going forward, or will they be cut as non-essential should the format of local government change? So I agree with the amendment, but this shouldn't be a motion on notice. This should be a proper report, policy change presented to council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Banks. Councillor Banks.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. I would like to take umbrage with Councillor Nicholson's statement that the last administration did not put up council tax. I know the parish that I'm in, we had to take on 29 lights at great expense, and it was looked upon as council tax by the back door. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Now, are there any further contributions to the discussion of the amendment? If not, I'll invite the proposer of the amendment to sum up, and then we'll move to a vote. Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
Well, I'm going to, yes, thank you.
Yeah, the last word.
First of all, I would like to thank all of the members who have contributed, and I think a lot of valid points have been made. This most certainly is a very complex, situation. I think the essence of this is that fairness ensures that councils that have adopted facilities, whether it be under pressure or whatever, will be penalised if the deadline of 22nd is removed before there is proper consideration. Now, I agree with a lot of the points made about the need for information. I most certainly agree with the point made by Councillor Wicks that this should be the subject of a detailed officer report, setting out all of the background, the various implications, statutory and otherwise, and a list of the options that are available to us. If we don't want to go into this blind, and we want to preserve the position of the councils that have taken the leap and not to penalise them, which is what we would be doing if we proceed to rescind the deadline. And we should, my genuine view is that we should not do anything until a scrutiny review reports. But in the interim, to protect the interests of the councils that have taken the leap, I would advocate that all members support my amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the debate on the amendment, which is in front of you. Forget the apostrophe at the end. And we're now going to vote on that. That's a proposal. The Eden District Council offers to refund the expenditure incurred by those parish and town councils that have adopted the services and wish to take advantage of a refund. Thank you very much to put all councils on
I would like a formal name vote, please.
Are there 5 now? I think we need 5 people to confirm.
Well, could you ask if after the
could we indicate? I guess it'll have to be in the chat. That's the rule we follow. If there are 5 other members happy with the named vote, will you please indicate now? You know the rules. Named vote. If there are 5, we've got 1. Yeah. I think we're pretty well. I think we're there. Yes. Okay. That's agreed. So yes, you can stop now. We've got more than 5. So we agreed to a named vote. And the significance of this is, of course, that it's recorded because, of course, in the present circumstances, we effectively do a name vote anyway, but it's recorded. OK, over to the monitoring officer. We're voting on the amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Baker,
Against.
Councillor Banks,
Against.
Councillor Chambers,
For.
Councillor Clark,
For.
Councillor Connell,
Against.
Councillor Derbyshire,
Against.
Councillor Dew,
For.
Councillor Isles,
Against.
Councillor Fearon,
For.
Councillor Greenwood,
Against.
Councillor Hanley,
Against.
Councillor Harker,
Against.
Councillor Holden,
Against.
Councillor Lynch, Councillor Martin,
For, and I'm disappointed you're not supporting your parish councils.
Councillor McCall,
Against.
Councillor Meadowcroft,
For.
Councillor Nicholson, Councillor Patterson,
Against.
Councillor Rain,
For.
Councillor Robinson,
Against.
Councillor Ross,
Against.
Councillor Ruddle,
Against.
Councillor Ryland,
For.
Councillor Story Cookson,
For.
Councillor Sharp,
Against.
Councillor Simpkins,
Against.
Councillor Smith,
Against.
Councillor Taylor,
Against.
Councillor Tonkin,
Against.
Councillor Wicks,
For.
Councillor Lynch,
For.
Chair, I make that 12 votes for the motion with 19 against, so the motion falls.
Thank you. Now, we revert to the motion, though I do recall Councillor Rain expressing a desire to propose an amendment. Is that still your wish, Councillor Rain?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Connell. I wish to propose that we extend the deadline past the March 22 date, or until the scrutiny review has been carried out. The scrutiny review was suggested by the chairman of the scrutiny committee. He says he's been asking for it for some time, but due to COVID, we haven't been able to have it. And also Councillor Nicholson had put that proposal forward, but it has been on the back foot due to COVID. So I would like to propose that we extend the deadline past March 2022, or until a scrutiny review has been carried out and a report comes to full council. We carry on with the status quo, if that makes sense.
I'll defer to the monitoring officer. Is that an acceptable amendment? It appears to be. It'll need to be put into writing.
Yeah.
Chair, sorry, carry on, Chair.
Yes, yes. Oh, please, you were speaking. Monitoring officer.
I suppose I'm just looking for clarity for what Councillor Rain wants to extend past the current deadline.
The grant system, and if any parishes wish to take on their assets after that deadline, which I think is mentioned in the motion. It said it, or it was mentioned in the reply to Jonathan Davis, it isn't deterring people.
With respect, I think we need to have a clear form of words so that everybody's clear exactly what is being proposed by this amendment.
Okay. Due to the COVID and the delay in the assets being devolved, that the deadline is extended until March 23. Carry on as status quo, but the deadline is extended to March 23 rather than March 22.
Monitoring officer, are you happy with that as an amendment? Okay, I think what I'm going to do is propose just 5 minutes, no more, a 5-minute adjournment before we resume and debate this amendment. Okay, just 5 minutes, so 20:35 we'll resume. Hello everybody, we've had our 5 minutes, so hopefully we've now got the amendment written up in a form that can be read by members wishing to speak, and indeed by members of the public, if there are any who've lasted this long. I see we have a seconder indicated, but I'm not going to follow the seconder until it is clear what the amendment actually is in writing. No, I'm not muted.
Chair, Member Services are just preparing a slide with what they think is the amendment that Councillor Rain has proposed. And obviously Councillor Rain will need to confirm whether that is the amendment he wishes to put forward.
I take it you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Rain, is what appears on screen what you are proposing?
Chair, I can hear you as if you are addressing the councillors.
I was going to hear you too.
Chair, I can hear you as well.
Thank you. Well, I take it that this is what the amendment is. Okay, thank you. Very good. Thank you, Joe. And I think you have a seconder in Councillor Ryland, if I interpreted correctly, but he'll need to confirm that verbally.
Yes, I'm happy to second the amendment that Councillor Rain has proposed. Speaking as a new councillor, can I speak on the amendment and why I'm supporting it?
You certainly can. Well, hang on, please, David. Councillors will indicate in chat anybody wants to speak on this. You can speak now, Councillor Ryland, as seconder, or you can reserve your right to speak later. So, are you going to speak now?
No, I'm quite happy to speak now.
It's your choice.
No, I'll speak now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I have a problem actually with the wording at number 2, and I'm speaking as a new councillor here. It's a very, very important issue, and it hasn't been addressed as the devolution over the last 2 years of this council. And it's well over 12 months since Councillor Holden actually asked specifically for this topic to go on the work agenda for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And actually a couple of councillors in addition have since requested as well. But the current chairman of Overview and Scrutiny has ignored these requests. I support this extension because I'm not entirely certain that at point 1 and 2 it's definitive that a task and finish group will be set up to try and sort out this problem. I also would have liked to have seen a report as well, but my question really is I'm seeking an assurance from Councillor Banks, the chairman of Overview and Scrutiny, the current chairman, that the devolution will be placed immediately on next year's work plan for the Scrutiny Committee as a matter of urgency.
I understand we're moving to a difficult area here because we seem almost to returning to the motion. However, I understand the difficulty, and so Councillor Banks, yes, respond to that if you wish, as you do.
It is on the work plan. At the last meeting, it was put on the works plan as a matter of urgency.
Okay. I understand at the last meeting, Councillor Banks, that you were supposed to contact Councillor Nicholson to actually set the work plan for a task and finish group to be set up for the work plan. I don't believe the task and finish group to set the work plan has been set up. So I was seeking an assurance that it will be placed, because this task and finish group, as you'll see in the recording of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, has not been set up to set the work plan up.
It was agreed to leave it until officers contacted us both.
Okay, I think we'll leave that there if you don't mind, gentlemen, because this is a debate of matter of fact, and this at the moment we're speaking to an amendment. You see the amendment here, and can I ask that councillors confine themselves to speaking on the amendment? Councillor Isles. Councillor Isles first, then Councillor Martin.
Yeah, we're just replacing one deadline with another. I think the original motion kind of addresses the problem in that we need to reassess the whole concept of offloading services to parish councils who may not be equipped to actually take them on. So I'm not happy about simply replacing one deadline with another one. We need to have a root and branch examination of this whole concept. It's all very well saying it's devolution, but in a lot of cases, it's actually losing the assets. and a lot has been made of it's saving Eden District Council money. Well, it's all very well, but somebody, taxpayers, still have to pay for it. It comes on the same council tax bill, so we need to address the whole problem and not simply extend the deadline for another year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see Councillor Martin speak on the amendment. Yes.
Yes, to speak on the amendment. I do agree extending the deadline. I do think we need a date for those parishes that have taken on the services. I think there does need to be a date because we're concerned what happens after March 2022. What's happening to those services that haven't been taken down? We're concerned. What are we going to be left with? Are we going to be left to look after those that aren't taken down in 2022? Or is there going to be any funding if it is extended? So I do agree to the extension of a date, putting a date on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. The proposal is to extend the deadline to a date 2 years from now. Now, I think some of the members are alluding that saying that they don't want a deadline. But if you don't want if you don't have a deadline for something like this, then you go on forever. And I would put it to members that 2 years is most certainly a reasonable time span to do all the things that members have indicated need to be done, to consider all the issues in a full and frank and fair way, and in a manner that, and I return to my statement about a level playing field that respects the interests of Eden Council residents and our town and parish councils. I think it is essential that the task finish group gets underway, and for all of these reasons, I would urge members to support this amendment. Otherwise, you go on forever.
Thank you. Councillor Sori Cookson.
Hello, I would like to endorse what. Hello, can
Hello.
you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to endorse what Councillor Mike Isles said. Extremely important subject, and we should consider it properly.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Isles, you have spoken on the amendment, but I take it I understand you have a question. Presumably you're putting this to the proposer of the amendment.
Well, it's a general question. Does this paragraph on the screen replace the two paragraphs in the original kind of motion, or is it a third paragraph? Because if all we're doing is replacing the original motion with this paragraph, all it's saying is they're going to extend the deadline by a year. It doesn't say anything about addressing the problem with a scrutiny group. And those one set up, but the one in the motion says to work with parishes and officers, and this does not mention anything about how a scrutiny panel be set up and what its remit is.
My understanding is that this replaces the entire motion, and this is it.
Yeah,
so that's what we're simply debating this. Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Wicks.
Yes, Chair. I think we're going round and round in circles here, and I think all it does is highlight the fact that there shouldn't be a motion on notice and needs doing properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dew.
Yes, Chair. I'd make a similar point. I'm speaking, as I've already said, with Kirkby Stephen Town Council in mind, which I am not a member of, who has committed itself to significant expense, taking on a range of services, and at this point in time I have no idea where we're going, and neither will other councillors. This issue needs to be resolved properly, as Councillor Wicks has said. The whole process is totally unsatisfactory. I'm confused. I'm going to vote against all of this and I would request that something is done about this in a degree and matter of urgency that will do justice to the seriousness of the subject in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other indications of wish to speak on the amendment.
I want to speak on it. I can't get this bloody chat to work.
Okay, Councillor Lynch, you've indicated verbally you want to speak, so
Thanks very much. I just wanted to endorse what Councillor Dew and Councillor Wick said and Councillor Nicholson said at the beginning. This whole process is flawed. It needs a proper debate by the full council. Now, that's my point. It sticks out like a man on a galloping horse can see it. A blind man on a galloping horse can see it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have we any other speakers? I see none. Councillor Rain, it is your right to sum up, and that will be the last speech before we proceed to a vote on your amendment.
Thank you. I did say that I would want a scrutiny review into this, and I think it's all going to happen is the scrutiny review. So therefore, a full report can come before council to get this motion on notice when there's been so many questions tonight. It's not exactly the correct thing to do. We need the background, we need more papers, we need to know what's happening at the moment. So I hope that people will support this so that we can get a full report to council, and then we know what we are going to do. We might go down the route that Councillor Isles is wanting to go down, but that is for the future. This is for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Sori Cookson, you've spoken once on this amendment. You haven't, as far as I know, spoken on the motion. So if the amendment is not carried, we revert the motion and you will have the opportunity to speak at that point. But for now, we go on to a vote on this amendment. So I hand over to the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chair. So as members will be aware, you are voting on the motion that is on the screen that you can see. Councillor Baker.
Against, for the reasons articulated by Councillor Isles.
Councillor Banks.
Against.
Councillor Chambers.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Connell.
Against.
Councillor Derbyshire.
Against.
Councillor Dew.
Abstain.
Councillor Isles.
Against.
Councillor Fearon.
Abstain.
Councillor Greenwood.
Against.
Councillor Hanley.
Against.
Councillor Harker.
Against.
Councillor Holden.
Against.
Councillor Lynch.
For.
Councillor Martin.
For.
Councillor McCall.
Against.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't hear that.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Meadowcroft.
For.
Councillor Nicholson.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
Against.
Councillor Rain.
For.
Councillor Robinson.
Against.
Councillor Ross.
Against.
Councillor Ruddle.
Against.
Councillor Ryland.
For.
Councillor Story Cookson.
Against.
Councillor Sharp.
Against.
Councillor Simpkins.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
Councillor Tonkin.
Against.
Councillor Wicks.
Abstain.
Chair, I make that 8 votes for the motion, 20 votes against the motion with 3 abstentions. So the motion falls.
Thank you. We now return to the original motion, if that could be displayed. And I know that Councillor Sorry Cookson wishes to comment, and he didn't speak on the motion before we move to the amendment. There's an opportunity for councillors to speak if they didn't speak beforehand on the motion. So we return to debate on the original motion. But if you did speak on the motion before we move to amendment, not again, please. Okay. So Councillor Sorry Cookson, we're now back to the motion which is displayed before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm saying now that parish councils should not have to pay for facilities that they do not use. For example, the public lavatories at Dufton, which are almost entirely used by those not resident in the parish.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, it was more a question to the leader. Is it known how many towns and parishes are unable or unwilling to adopt assets, and how many towns and parishes have adopted the assets? I still show my concern for what happens after 2022, how this will affect Heskett as we have signed the agreement. We want to know if there's any more funding. You know, this is a big thing for us. All the lights that we have kept on, we've had lights taken down that villagers didn't want taken down through no fault of our own. Lights are still there. Just want to know what's going to happen next. And without it going to overview and scrutiny, I didn't like the answer that the leader gave earlier. So I'd just like to know what's going to happen. Thank you.
Okay.
May I respond to that?
Well, can we see if there's anybody, you have a concluding speech awaiting you. I don't see anybody else indicating, so I take it we now move on to what is both your response and indeed your summing up speech. Okay, so this is I think
Councillor Robinson is to speak. I think Councillor Robinson.
Sorry.
I think Councillor Robinson reserved the right to speak. I imagine she will want to.
Okay, you did indeed indicate that earlier on, Councillor Robinson. So would you like to speak now as a seconder?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I think the conversations and the debate that we've actually had tonight just highlights just how important this work is going to be going forward. And I'm pleased to hear that it's definitely on the scrutiny review, scrutiny panel to look at. Councillor Martin, I wholeheartedly understand your point, and I think we can, as an executive, tell scrutiny what to do, but what we can do is we can instruct that scrutiny has the sufficient officers to be able to do that work, rather than the officers work it up. Everybody understands the depth that members understand their parishes. So you know that it was unpopular in a lot of places. You know the footway lighting position, that it was started off with North West Electricity telling EDC to get our lights off their poles. And then it moved on to also devolution of services. It is an unlevel playing field, because sometimes parishes have been charged special expenses, and other times, such as other places haven't. Special expenses have now gone. It needs a complete and utter overhaul. I entirely agree with Councillor Isles, and I think Councillor Cookson touched on that as well. I'm sure members would embrace the opportunity to be able to look at this going forward, look at what we've learned. I know Councillor Tonkin has all the details that you need, Councillor Martin, and I think that conversation could be had at a scrutiny panel by calling Councillor Tonkin in. So all I will say is that in number 2, the scope is with scrutiny to actually go to the depths that you feel that we need to go to as a council, and make those recommendations to full council going forward. I signed hundreds of agreements, and I'm not joking, because the pieces of paper had pages and pages with each parish, and I knew I was signing something that wasn't particularly popular. I really welcome a complete and utter review into where we need to go, and I'll leave it now for the leader to conclude and answer some of the questions that have been put forward, but I do second the motion.
Thank you. I see no further wishes to speak from people who've not already spoken, and therefore I'm going to hand it over to the leader who proposed the motion and has the right to speak last on it before the vote is taken, and the vote will be a name vote since there have already been 6 requests for that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I mean, just following up with what Councillor Robinson says, I think as everybody has been talking about the difficulties they see, I'm just sitting here agreeing with you. Yes, so so Councillor Dew says it needs resolving properly, the justice to the seriousness of the matter in hand. Exactly. This is what we are proposed to do, and this is the process by which we propose to do it. The scrutiny, yes, no, I can't call scrutiny, but we have heard that that it has been that it is on the work plan. It hasn't been dealt with yet, but it will indeed be expedited now. It's going to be a big job and a difficult job, because everything that's been said today, everything that's been said this evening has got to be resolved, and that is not going to be easy. So Councillor Nicholson asked, well, what does it mean for the benefit of the communities we serve? Well, it means that that the assets that were formerly in EDC's ownership were used by the community for the benefit of the community, and that that we wish to retain these assets for the benefit of the community, and how they are maintained, how they are paid for, which are retained, which are not, needs to be resolved. The process in the previous we've seen from everybody talking just how patchy this process has been, how it's suited some and not others. Some people feel they have, some parishes will feel they have are being disadvantaged financially by this. Some people by the process of perhaps others not being required to take things on. If they took something on unwillingly and now EDC is going to carry on retaining it, then yes, they have a legitimate grievance. It's all got to be sorted out. What this motion does is merely remove the deadline, the guillotine, which if we followed that, and what we don't do except follow the policy that we have, it would mean that losing Kirby Stew, not in Kirby Stew, excuse me, losing Penrith and I live in Appleby would close. And I mean that because the parishes are not willing or able to take them on in that time scale in the condition they're in. And that is no good. It just cannot happen. We cannot allow that to happen. It's a difficult situation. It's a complex situation, and I feel that their members and officers between them will be equal to sorting out a policy which is acceptable to parishes, which is acceptable to ECC, which is acceptable to their members, which works financially, and which proceeds into the unknown future of devolution, when indeed it may well be that there's changes again. So we really need to be, as much as possible, that parishes, towns are fully in possession of their assets in good condition, with clear ways of maintaining them into the future for the benefit of the community that they serve. So I'd just like to reiterate that the speed is was it Councillor Martin who mentioned the sliding scale and the difficulty of that, and when are we going to start, and is that going to change? All of these things have to be resolved. So I'd like to please to propose the motion, which is simply the removal of deadline, yeah, and proposing a method by which a policy can be resolved. It says nothing about what that policy will be, and I move the motion once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The debate is now concluded and we move to the vote, which shall be at the request of 6 members, a named vote. Over to you, Monitoring Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity for members of the public that are watching, Councillor Isles has requested a named vote, and constitutionally he is required to have the support of 4 members in order to do that, and I have recorded that he has the support of Councillors Greenwood, Sharp, Holden and McCall.
And Rudolph too. Yeah.
So to proceed to the vote on the original motion, which had 2 motions on it, Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Banks.
For.
Councillor Chambers.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
Reluctantly for.
Councillor Connell.
For.
Councillor Derbyshire.
For.
Councillor Dew. Councillor Isles.
For.
Councillor Fearon.
Abstain.
Councillor Greenwood.
For.
Councillor Hanley.
For.
Councillor Harker.
For.
Councillor Holden.
For.
Councillor Lynch.
Abstain.
Councillor Martin.
Against.
Councillor McCall.
For.
Councillor Meadowcroft.
Against.
Councillor Nicholson.
Abstain.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Rain.
Abstain.
Councillor Robinson.
For.
Councillor Ross.
For.
Councillor Ruddle.
For.
Councillor Ryland.
Abstain.
Councillor Sorry Cookson.
For.
Councillor Sharp.
For.
Councillor Simpkins.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
For.
Councillor Tonkin.
For.
Councillor Wicks.
Abstain.
Chair, I have that as 21 votes for the motion, 3 against with 7 abstentions. So the motion is passed.
Thank you very much. If I may, I'd like to thank councillors for their contributions to a complex debate in which we kept up a very, I think, a high standard of relevance and good temper throughout. And we're now moving on to agenda item 8. This is going to be presented by Councillor Greenwood, but before it is, I would like to point out corrections that have to be made 3 times. Where it says Director of Corporate Services, this should read Director of Resources. Therefore, in the title of this agenda item, the end of the 3rd line, Director of Resources, and in the 3rd recommendation, again, Interim Director of Resources. sorry, this was an administrative oversight, and I hope everybody's clear. I shall now hand over to you, Councillor Greenwood, to propose this motion. That will be followed. If there are any questions on the motion, they can be put, and then we'll seek a seconder and move into debate. Councillor Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the report about the Acting Chief Executive and the Interim Director of Resources. And the purpose of this report is to consider the resolutions of Human Resources and Appeals Committee in respect of the Acting Chief Executive and Director of Resources. So I will just say that on the 23rd of March 2021, the HR and Appeals Committee met, and regarding the Acting Chief Executive, they identified that extending the existing arrangements as their preferred option, and that the dialogue be opened with Carlisle City Council. This dialogue has been positive and an agreement in principle reached for the extension, subject to the approval of both councils. And regarding the Director of Resources, the HR and Appeals Committee identified extending the existing interim arrangements as their preferred option, and through the consequent dialogue, Paul Sutton has expressed his willingness for this to occur, subject to council approval. So, Chair, I would just like to thank the HR and Appeals Committee for their consideration of all the details of all of the options and for making their unanimous recommendations to Council tonight. And I am pleased to move these recommendations. And the recommendations are to agree to extend the current arrangements for sharing the Acting Chief Executive with Carlisle City Council until the 31st of December 2021, and to agree to extend the current remuneration arrangements for the Deputy Chief Executive position until the 31st of December 2021, and to agree to extend the current arrangements with the Interim Director of Resources until 31st of December 2021. Thank you very much, Chair.
There we are. I've muted myself. If there are any questions, put them now. Otherwise, we'll move to a seconder. I see we already have a seconder in the chat function. Okay, in the absence of any indication of questions on the motion, Councillor Wicks, will you confirm, please, that you are seconding the recommendations?
Yes, Chair, I'm more than happy to second the recommendations within this report.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anybody wish to speak to this motion?
I would.
Councillor Tory Cookson.
Yes, I'd like to thank Karen for her hard work in producing such an excellent report.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wishing to speak? In that case, we move to a vote. I'm tempted to propose that unless anybody indicates otherwise, we take this as read. Would please anyone indicate if they would like a roll call? In that case, I state that the motion has been passed. NEMCON. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So all that remains is the date of the next scheduled meeting. That will be the annual meeting of council. It will be held on 27th May 2021. Precise arrangements will be given out later. Okay. All that remains is to thank everyone for their attendance and their patience, and wish you all good night.
Chair.